In the hushed wood-paneled corridors of Global Affairs Canada, a diplomatic cable of extraordinary severity is being drafted. It is not addressed to a traditional adversary. Its target is not Moscow or Beijing. This message is being prepared for Washington, and its subject is a distant icy landmass that has suddenly become the hottest flashpoint in geopolitics, Greenland. We have just learned that the Canadian government is issuing a formal, sharply worded warning to the campaign of Donald J. Trump. The warning concerns an audacious plan being devised by Trump's inner circle for a potential second term. The plan is to forcibly acquire Greenland, not through polite purchase, but through immense political and economic coercion. And Ottawa is drawing a line in the Arctic ice. This is not a routine diplomatic protest. This is a strategic red alert from America's closest ally, a neighbor that shares the world's longest undefended border. The language is described as unprecedented in its bluntness for communications between these two nations. Canada is signaling that a move on Greenland would be considered a direct threat to Canadian sovereignty, security, and its very future as an Arctic nation. The warning is a controlled detonation in the fragile landscape of North American relations. It reveals a terrifying fracture. For decades, the Arctic was a zone of quiet cooperation, governed by science and international law. Now, Trump's reported ambitions threaten to turn it into a theater of raw, great power competition. The warning from Ottawa is a desperate attempt to avert a crisis before it begins. But why Greenland? Why now? And why would Canada risk such a profound rupture with its most important ally? The answers lie in a chilling convergence of greed, strategy, and a fundamental misunderstanding of the modern world. Sources close to the Trump operation describe Greenland as the ultimate real estate deal. It is seen as a vast, mineral-rich territory poorly managed by a small Scandinavian kingdom, Denmark. In the transactional worldview of Trump's advisors, it is an asset waiting to be seized. Their models are historical: the Louisiana Purchase, the Alaska deal. They believe immense pressure on Denmark through trade tariffs, NATO threats, and financial manipulation could force a sale. They fundamentally misread the resolve of the Danish people and the Greenlanders themselves. This is not 1867. This is the 21st century. And Canada sees the terrifying precedent such a move would set. If the United States can bully a NATO ally into surrendering sovereign territory, what stops them from turning that pressure northward? Canadian intelligence has been tracking this developing doctrine within Trump's circle for months. Dossiers have been prepared. Scenario planners at National Defense have been running war games with unthinkable scenarios. The conclusion is unanimous. A U.S. annexation of Greenland would be an existential catastrophe for Canada. It would completely encircle the Canadian Arctic. Imagine a map. Canada's northern sovereignty is already tenuous, a claim stretched thin over vast archipelagos and frozen seas. Now, imagine the United States with its immense military and disregard for environmental protocols, establishing a dominant presence on Greenland's eastern coast. The entire Canadian Arctic would be sandwiched. Canadian vessels transiting the Northwest Passage would be flanked by American-controlled territory. The strategic autonomy of Canada would vanish overnight. The warning, therefore, is a preemptive strike. It is designed to expose the plan to sunlight, hoping the glare of public scrutiny will kill it. It is a message to Europe. Canada stands with Denmark. It is a message to the American establishment: this madness must be stopped. And it is a message to the Trump camp: your path leads here, to conflict with your oldest friend. The historical context adds profound weight to this moment. Canada and the United States have managed their borders and disputes with civility for over a century. The last serious bilateral crisis was the War of 1812. Disputes over fishing or lumber have been settled in panels, not with threats. This potential move on Greenland shatters that centuries-old compact. It treats sovereignty as a commodity. It treats allies as vassals. For Canada, a nation whose identity is deeply tied to multilateralism and rules-based order, this is an assault on its core principles. The operational details of the Trump plan, as understood by Canadian intelligence, are as crude as they are dangerous. Leverage points have been identified. Denmark's reliance on the U.S. for its defense through NATO is key. Threaten to withdraw that protection unless Greenland is put on the table. Another lever is the financial system. Target Danish banks with secondary sanctions, crippling their access to dollar clearing. A third is pure political chaos. Recognize a fringe independence movement in Greenland, bypassing Copenhagen entirely to create a puppet entity willing to negotiate. It is a playbook of hybrid warfare applied to an ally. Canada's warning likely enumerates the retaliatory measures Ottawa would be forced to take. These are not listed lightly. They would represent a comprehensive unraveling of the bilateral relationship, suspension of intelligence sharing through the Five Eyes alliance, a freeze on all defense procurement and joint military exercises, a recalibration of energy exports, redirecting oil and gas away from the United States, and, most symbolically potent, a review of all NORAD agreements that form the bedrock of continental aerospace defense. The warning makes clear, if you do this, the special relationship is over. The pacing of this crisis is accelerating. The warning is not a private memo. It is being delivered through multiple channels to the State Department, to key senators, and directly to Trump's campaign headquarters. It is also being subtly signaled in public through strategically placed editorials in influential outlets and background briefings to trusted journalists. This is 21st century statecraft, a combination of private ultimatum and public shaping of the narrative. The emotional tension in Ottawa is palpable. There is a profound sense of betrayal. Canadian officials who worked hand in glove with American counterparts for decades feel a sickening dismay. The very idea that their partner could contemplate such a colonial land grab next door is disorienting. The diplomatic corps is furious. The military is alarmed. The political leadership across party lines is united in a rare moment of absolute consensus. This is Canada's enough moment. The curiosity hooks are manifold. How did Canada learn the specifics? Intelligence likely came from multiple streams. Signals intelligence picking up chatter among Trump advisors. Human sources within the Washington political ecosystem. Analysis of policy papers circulating in MAGA-aligned think tanks. The pieces were put together by Canada's spy agency, CSES, and its communications security establishment, CSE. The picture that emerged was coherent and terrifying enough to trigger a cabinet-level crisis meeting. The narrative suspense lies in the reaction from Mar-a-Lago. Will Trump dismiss the warning as coming from a weak leader? Will he see it as a challenge to be met with greater force? Or will the sheer scale of the potential consequences give even his most radical advisors pause? The gamble by Canada is that the institutional weight of the U.S. security apparatus will mobilize against the plan, that the Pentagon, recognizing the catastrophic loss of a critical intelligence partner, will intervene, that the CIA will warn of a global realignment, pushing Canada into closer ties with European powers and away from Washington. The drama is geopolitical, but deeply personal for the people of the Arctic. The Inuit of Canada and Greenland share a culture and family ties that predate modern borders. They have been consistently consulted on issues of sovereignty and development. A Trump-led seizure would trample their rights and their homeland. Canada's warning implicitly champions their cause, positioning Ottawa as the protector of Indigenous rights against a crude imperialist grab. The broader geopolitical context turns this from a bilateral spat into a global inflection point. China and Russia are watching with keen interest. For Moscow, a split in NATO over Arctic aggression is a dream scenario. It would validate their own heavy-handed Arctic militarization. For Beijing, which has already expressed interest in Greenland's minerals, a U.S. takeover might open doors for strategic investment or alternatively create a powerful anti-American rallying cry. Canada's warning is thus also a signal to other great powers. The rules still matter, and we will defend them. The financial implications are staggering. Greenland is believed to hold some of the world's largest deposits of rare earth elements, crucial for everything from smartphones to fighter jets. It has vast untapped oil and gas reserves. The Trump worldview sees this as a treasure to be claimed for American dominance. The Canadian view and the Danish view is that these resources must be developed sustainably with benefits to the local population and adherence to climate goals. A U.S. corporate free-for-all would be an environmental and social disaster. Canada's warning is thus also a defense of a different economic model. As the script unfolds, we delve into the legal dimensions. Under international law, the forced purchase or annexation of territory from a sovereign state is illegal. It violates the UN Charter. Canada's warning places it firmly on the side of international law, potentially setting the stage for a showdown at the United Nations Security Council, where the U.S. would likely veto any resolution, isolating itself further. The warning also invokes the Arctic Council, the premier forum for Arctic cooperation, where Canada, Denmark, and the U.S. cite as members. To weaponize the Arctic is to destroy the last vestige of post-Cold War cooperative governance. The rhythm of the story must mirror the cold, deliberate pace of Canadian diplomacy suddenly shifting into urgent, high-stakes action. We move from the quiet analysis in Ottawa to the potential storm in the Arctic waters. We picture Canadian Armed Forces patrols increasing their presence in the high Arctic, a silent, tangible backing of the diplomatic words. We imagine the Royal Canadian Navy's new Arctic patrol ships being placed on higher alert, a show of resolve not seen in generations. The character of the key players defines the conflict. On one side, the Trump advisors, ideologues, opportunists, and deal makers who see the world as a monopoly board. On the other, Canadian Prime Minister Justin Trudeau, and more importantly, the nonpartisan machinery of the Canadian Foreign Service, a community of professionals steeped in the tradition of Lester B. Pearson, now facing their greatest test. They are not firebrands, they are calculators, and their calculation is that this risk must be taken. The warning is also a message to the American public. It says, your ally, your neighbor, your friend believes your potential president is contemplating an act of such profound recklessness that we must prepare for the end of our partnership. It is designed to cut through the domestic political noise and land with moral force. It asks a simple question: is this who you are? The suspense builds as we consider the potential for miscalculation. What if Trump, feeling cornered by the warning, accelerates the plan? What if a diplomatic incident is engineered in the Davis Strait to create a pretext for action? Canadian planners are considering these dark possibilities. The warning is the first move in a game of multidimensional chess where one player seems to favor smashing the board. The historical echo of the 1911 Canadian election reverberates. Then, a proposed reciprocity treaty with the US sparked fears of American annexation and was soundly defeated. The ghost of that anxiety, the fear of American absorption, has never fully left the Canadian psyche. This Greenland move taps directly into that deep-seated national neurosis. It is not just about territory, it is about national survival. The operational response will extend beyond diplomacy. Canada will immediately deepen its security partnership with Denmark and Norway. Joint Arctic patrols, shared satellite surveillance, and integrated submarine tracking will be fast-tracked. Quiet conversations with France, another Arctic nation through Saint-Pierre and Miquelon, will begin. The warning is the public tip of a vast iceberg of contingency planning already underway. The economic fallout would be immediate and severe. The integrated auto industry would seize. The flow of electricity across the border could become a political tool. Tourism would collapse. The warning makes clear that the pain would be mutual, but Canada, in defense of its sovereignty, is willing to bear it. This is a nation preparing for economic war with its largest trading partner. The narrative must also capture the human element in remote Arctic communities. In Iqaluit, in Nuuk, people are hearing the rumors. The fear is tangible. Their peaceful, fragile environment could become a pawn in a game of great power ambition. Canada's warning is a vow to amplify their voices, to ensure the people of Greenland are not bartered away in a backroom deal. As the script progresses, the scale of the response becomes clear. This is not an isolated incident. It is the catalyst for a global realignment. Expect the European Union to issue a statement of firm support for Denmark and Canada. NATO headquarters in Brussels will be thrown into silent chaos, faced with a crisis that pits two members against a third, who happens to be its leader. The very foundation of the alliance would be questioned. The final act of this drama is the waiting game. The warning has been delivered. The world holds its breath. Will there be a furious tweet storm dismissing Canada, a quiet shelving of the plan, or an escalation that leads us into uncharted frigid waters? Canada has thrown a stone into the pond of geopolitics. The ripples are spreading toward every shore. The warning is a testament to a new, harsh reality. In the age of transactional politics, even the oldest friendships must be defended with cold, hard resolve. Canada has just drawn its line. The world now watches to see if America crosses it. The story of the Greenland warning will be studied for generations as the moment Canada stood up, not to an enemy, but to its friend, and said, no further. This is not just about ice and rock. It is about the soul of the international order. And Canada, in its polite, firm, and now sharpest tone, has just issued a warning for the ages.